This is Jonathan Agger, fifth pro boxing fans, joined by Paul Smith Jr. Paul, appreciate your time. How's things? How's things with you, first of all?
Good, thank you, mate. All good, not too bad. Um, just the usual, mate. Usual day-to-day stuff, non-stop. How about yourself? You okay?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Well, big things coming in January. The launch of Global Fighters Union, which you're obviously a co-founder of. I guess this is a big step in the boxing world. Talk to us a bit about it and how you got involved in because yeah, it's a very interesting a thing that's happening.
Yeah, it's something that I've always had in the back of my mind. Now it's firmly in the forefront, but for a long time, I've always don't really like too many things that happen in boxing with regards to injustice, with regards to fighters being taken advantage of, with regards to fighters not having basic rights of what other sportsmen and sportswomen do. There's just I've had too many conversations on the street with people who don't know boxing, and the mind's blown by it, and they're taken aback by some of the things that I say, and it's not even sort of you know it's not even really bad stuff what I'm talking about. It's just the basic rights, as I mentioned before, about of fighters being missing or not there or brushed over, or and it's just not fair. Fighters are a special kind of athletes. It's different than a lot of other sports, and so many sports, the athlete is taken care of, and the participants in the sport are taken care of, even with regards to medicals, health, insurance, pensions, things like that, minimum pay or whatever you might call it, or a basic rate of pay. In boxing, it's just a minefield at times, and if the only people regulating it at the moment in Britain is the British Boxing Board of Control.
Yeah, Paul. So, I guess, a lot of when fighters retire, I guess there's not always, like you say, a body to look after them in terms of pension and things like that, and it's reliant on what you earn when you're in your career. And I think people say like it's the 5% of fighters actually earn enough to sort of, look after themselves outside of boxing. So talk to us about what the GFU will be able to do for fighters after their careers end.
It's a good stat what you've used. Now, if you use that stat at the moment, there's 1,200 fighters in this country at the moment active, so maybe only 60 of them might be able to look after themselves after they finish fighting. And it's alarming, some of the numbers in boxing, but I've seen it time and again. There's two kids and then they're knocking seven bells out of each other on a chief as a chief support on an undercard or one of the big shows on the weekend, and people who don't really know the game will not understand it, will assume that they're on £1 million each or something, and they're probably getting 5 grand. And that's the difference with other sports at the moment, and some sports anyway out there, especially sports as big as boxing. There's just not enough money in some of the fights for the fighters to even pay the bills that month, never mind for the year, or to look after themselves. And after boxing, the aftercare is horrendous, as you said. It's non-existent. And again, I'm not just criticizing the Boxing Board of Control or any commission around the world. It's like there's no aftercare for fighters. There's no phone calls. There's no, and your phone's not stopping when you're fighting, especially from people like the Boxing Board of Control or promoters. But the minute you stop fighting, that's it. The phone doesn't ring anymore. Um, and you're fending for yourself, and that's it. And if you haven't put enough away, or you haven't managed your finances right, or you haven't been in the position where you've been able to invest money or whatever, you're the one who's going to be suffering. And it's not fair considering that you've given your life to a sport and a career when you couldn't really do anything else on the side, because that would take away from the 100% effort and dedication needed to boxing. Then it's not the best, as we said.
So tell us what GFU, the main aims of it are, and what it will provide for fighters.
It's a good question, and it's one that we've been working behind the scenes for a long time now. This has been a long time coming, and not just something quick and a flash in the pan, which will then fizzle out quick. It's going to be here to stay. It's something that's we're making sure every facet is in place, every element is ready before we launch, and looking after fighters, making sure that the right healthcare is in place for them, making sure that the right insurances are in place with them, just ensuring that the officials in place who are overseeing boxing actually know boxing. I've lost count of the amount of arguments I've had with boxing board control inspectors in dressing rooms who don't know what they're looking for when they're wrapping hands. And
Mm.
there's videos out there of my brother Liam doing it, one of the officials that was abroad, but I'm telling officials that can't be done, and they're like, it can, and then we have to get the boss in, and the boss comes in and goes, no, that's illegal, and the inspector was just allowing it. And I've got nothing against boxing board control inspectors. There's, I keep saying this, that we need to tighten everything up around everybody. If you're overseeing or officiating in any form of sport, you should know that sport inside out, and you should be very experienced in that sport. And we're seeing it all too often in boxing, especially, that there's a lot of people who are not experienced in boxing, who don't really know much about boxing, but they find themselves in position of some form of power or um, some form of responsibility, holding a form of responsibility in boxing, and it's not right, and the boxers should just be taken seriously. Again, other fighters, you know what I mean? There's fighters out there, obviously in MMA and other sports around the world, and combat sports, should I say, and they need that guidance as well, and that there's not the right regulations and officials in place in them sports. Maybe, bringing in some form of minimum pay. There's too many fighters out there at the moment fighting on ticket deals only, and the fighting, sometimes they're selling thousands of pounds worth of tickets, and after the promoters have to take their fee for putting the show on, which is again rightfully so. The opponent is being paid, which again rightfully so. That should be happening. And the fighter's left with nothing, maybe a couple of £100, and they have to try and live off sponsorship, or try and get sponsorship, and try and live off other forms of income until the next fight. And they're just trying the best to make it. And they've got potential, they've got talent, they can be good fighters, but they probably never reach that or realize that potential, because the road to get there is too hard sometimes. And again, as I say, your health's at risk all along in this, and that's one of the most important things you need to remember.
And outside of that, when we see sort of these, baffling judges' decisions, and for example, on the weekend we saw Hitchens beat Parrow, but one of the judges gave it in favour of Parrow, but I think it's 117, 110, which was most people said was ridiculous. And had he have not won that fight, I guess, that affects further paydays down the line, etc. Is that something as well you guys will look at sort of addressing or
I would love to. I'd absolutely love to do that. I lost the world title fight in Germany to Arthur Abraham. I felt I did enough. A lot of people thought I did enough. The rematch for that fight, the money that I got in the rematch wasn't life changing at all. With the rematch that I would have got had I won the title, as well as being world champion, and I would have been the first world champion from Liverpool in 20 years, 21 years or something. My brother Liam then became the first world champion from Liverpool. Um, in that period, the money then would have been life changing. The world title after my name would have been life changing. The becoming world champion would have obviously changed my life, and that's down to a couple of judges, one judge especially in particular, who gave me 1 round only. And bear in mind, he'd spoke to me friend that day. He was a very reputable man in boxing in Britain at the time. And one of the other officials told him that I wouldn't get 1 round off that judge, that later on that night in the fight. That was before the fight had even happened. So he ends up giving me 1 round because I probably did well. But that shouldn't even be a conversation in this day and age, in 2024, about to go into 2025, and it is. Now, if you have one judge that gives a terrible card in, why can't that judge sit down in front of a panel of ex-fighters, current fighters, media, people who are reputable in boxing, who know the stuff, who know how to score fights, former officials, current officials even? Why shouldn't they be allowed to sit down in front of a panel and explain the decisions? You've just changed someone's life with your decision. It's either incompetence, it's either corruption, or it's either just inept. You're not good enough at the job, or you felt the pressure. That's fine. That happens. That happens all over the world in high pressure jobs. It's tough scoring fights. I've been a pundit, been an analyst for years. I've sat commentating on fights. I love commentating, and scoring a fight while you're commentating is hard to do. You're sitting on one side of the ring and I'm on the other side, and we can see a different fight. And I totally understand and accept that. But I can come out after the fight and explain why I scored it the way I scored it, and I've got no problem doing so. And no judge or referee is allowed to do that, and they should be able to do that. And I think if you just had one or two of them explaining the decisions, even if you don't agree with it, you'll respect it a hell of a lot more, and you'll know that it's just how they saw the fight, because boxing is very subjective and opinion based, obviously. But the fact that no one ever has to answer to anyone, and no matter what happens, the governing body will usually defend them, come out and say, "Oh, it's subjective," and I felt it was the same way, when it's obviously clearly not that way. Then you get people who know boxing calling other people who they don't think knows but know boxing, and then becomes that argument of, is it corruption? Is it incompetence? Is it, why aren't they allowed to answer to people? We see it at the moment with football. Obviously, it's the national sport in this country. It's the biggest sport in this country, and we see debates about officials on Sky Sports News and other channels out there every single weekend. There's some form of referee or official watch or debate or argument, and they have the most money, the best facilities, the best cameras, the best replays, the best angles of all them incidents, and they're debating them all week. And it's easy to see what went wrong. It's easy to see that they get it wrong. But then the Premier League, or the is it the PGMOL? I can't remember what it stands for, but they'll come out and they'll explain the decision, whereas nothing ever gets explained in boxing. It's just it's done. That's it. Draw a line. Next week we go again, and the same officials are working the following week and score and fight the same following week, and referee and fight the following week, no matter what weekend they've had previously. And that's obviously my issue. It just, if everyone just bats with a straight bat and does things the right way, officiates boxing the right way, looks after the fighters. Listen, the fighters are the priority. Without fighters, there is no boxing. We'll always find officials. We'll always find people to judge it. We'll always find fans. There'll always be fans. Without boxers, there is no sport, and without fighters, there is no sport. And that's gone a little bit, as a subheading sometimes, rather than the main reason about why we are all there watching Fight Night, and it's because of the fighters.
And in the Premier League, they've got obviously big funding, from broadcasters, etc. Obviously, boxing is a lot of broadcasters now, you see DAZN and Sky and things like that. Is that the aim, get some of these broadcasters on board with what you're doing with GFU?
Yeah, yeah. Listen, not only does it have to be that way, we feel we've been looking at the legislations from the PFA. We've been speaking with the PFA and having Zoom calls and meetings with the PFA over the last couple of years to try and get this system in place, where we can't expect the fighters who are struggling, who we're trying to help, to cough up X amount a year to join a union, to be covered by health insurance, to be covered by a pension pot, or to be in a position to look after the families or look after themselves, when they're finding it hard to pay the bills as it is. And if a small percentage of the television money, and it is only a very small percentage of the television money, could filter through into the union pot to look after fighters and to take care of ex-fighters, then everyone should be on board with that and not have a problem with that. Promoters, television networks themselves, this is a feather in any cap of the television companies at the moment, to be, to revolutionize the sport of boxing, combat fighting, combat sports all around the world, to give back to the fighters and the athletes who are risking their lives doing that. And listen, they're risking their lives doing a job that they really, really want to do. By the way, it's a dream to be a professional fighter. I lived that dream, and I say this all the time when I see kids nowadays thinking, "Oh, I'll just turn professional," like it's something to fall back on. It's a privilege to turn professional. I get that, but you should also be protected when you're doing it. It's a job at the end of the day. It's a sport. There's billions of money in boxing at the moment. And if just a small percentage of it could filter through to look after fighters after they retire, after they've given it all to the game, after they've given it all to the sport, and after they've given it all for everyone else's entertainment, and then that surely is something that we can all, work together and be on the same page about. We just want to look after the fighters. That's it. With the union, it's not going to be, a money making organization. There's not going to be people sitting there getting high class, high salaries and benefits and living off this. This is all for the fighters, and that's how it should be, and that's how it will be.